The Zodiac Killer is one of the most infamous unidentified serial killers in America. But what made him legendary was not just the murders. It was the game he played with the entire country. In the late 1960s Northern California was peaceful until December 1968 when two teenagers were shot and killed near Vallejo. Police assumed it was isolated. They were wrong. The killer struck again and again, time targeting couples in secluded, arresting gun sniffs and brutal close contact attacks. But then letters began arriving. The Zodiac sent cryptic messages to newspapers, filled with symbols, threats, and codes claiming he had killed dozens. He mocked. Police taunted readers and demanded his letters be printed or he would strike again. One cipher contained 408 characters and he claimed it revealed his identity if anyone could solve it. Early victims were shot in parked cars, others were stabbed in daylight, and one couple was bound and attacked on a lakeside. With every killing he left fear and a trail of impossible clues. The Zodiac craved attention, content, and terror. He treated murder like a public performance, sharing in how the nation reacted and how helpless police felt. Experts believe he was intelligent, obsessed with power. Detectives interviewed thousands, built psychological profiles, and chased countless suspects. But the Zodiac always slipped away, sometimes by minutes. Each new letter renewed the panic and each new cipher sent investigators into a frenzy. Some messages were decoded, others still remain unsolved. After 1974, the letters stopped, the killings stopped, and the Zodiac disappeared with it warning or explanation. His case remains open and theories continue to multiply, but none have ever been proven true. The Zodiac Killer was never caught. 5 confirmed victims, dozens more claimed, and a legacy of fear that still haunts America. John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown, a man who entertained children at birthday parties while hiding the bodies of his victims beneath his home. Born in 1942 in Gacy, grew up under an abusive, alcoholic father who humiliated and beat him constantly. As an adult, Gacy became the opposite of what he endured. Friendly, helpful, lividolda in community events, a businessman, and even a volunteer clown named Pogo. Everyone thought he was harmless. Everyone was wrong. Behind closed doors, Gacy struggled with rage control issues and disturbing urges. He began targeting young men, promising them work, money, or a safe place to stay. When they entered his house, he never left. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy lured his victims, stripped them, handcuffed them, and assaulted them. Many were strangled with rope tightened slowly so he could watch them die. He buried 26 bodies in the crawl space under his home, stacked side by side in the dark dirt below his floorboards. Others were dumped in rivers when he ran out of room. Neighbors smelled something, but Gacy always had excuses: dead animals, leaking pipes, anything but the truth. Gacy craved power. He lived a double life: a respected citizen on the surface and a predator underneath. His ability to charm and manipulate is what made him so dangerous. In December 1978, 15-year-old Robert Pius vanished after being seen with Gacy. Police searched his home and found jewelry, handcuffs, and a disturbing smell rising from the crawl space. When officers tore open the floor, they uncovered human remains one after another. Gacy confessed to over 33 murders, one of the highest body counts in U.S. history. The scale of his crimes shocked the nation and redefined how far a killer could hide in plain sight. In 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. During his final days, painted pictures of clowns if mocking the world with the same mask he once wore. Andrei Chikatilo is known as one of the most violent serial killers the world has ever seen. But what makes his story challenges? How long he hunted without anyone stopping him. Born in 1936 in Soviet Ukraine, Chikatilo grew up during famine where starvation was so severe stories of cannibalism were common. Bullied for weakness, ignored for years, and traumatized by war, developed deep psychological scars that would shape the monster he later became. As an adult, Chikatilo struggled with impotence, which filled him with shame and rage. But he discovered something horrifying: violence excited him in ways nothing else could. From that moment, there was no turning back. Between 1978 and 1990, Chikatilo lured women and children from bus stops, train stations, and quiet streets into forests. Once Allen he stabbed, mutilated, sometimes cannibalized his victims. Many bodies were found with missing organs. He's gouged out and dozens of stab wounds his signature. His killings escalated, becoming more frenzied, more brutal, and more frequent. The Soviet Union was terrified, but police had no idea they were dealing with a single killer. Chikatilo said violence made him feel powerful. The only time he felt in control, he saw his victims as symbols of his frustration, and killing became his addiction. His ability to appear ordinary, a teacher, a father, a neighbor, made him nearly invisible. The investigation was a disaster. Soviet police arrested innocent people, followed false leads, and refused to admit a serial killer existed. Chikatilo was questioned multiple times and released every time. While police chased the wrong men, he kept killing. In 1990, an officer noticed Chikatilo approaching child near a train station. He was arrested, and forensic evidence finally linked him to the murders. During interrogation, confessed to 56 killings in disturbing detail. In 1994, Andrei Chikatilo was executed with a single gunshot to the head. The butcher of Rostov left behind a trail of horror that still haunts Eastern Europe. Albert Fish is often described as one of the most sadistic killers America has ever known. But even among serial killers, his crimes stand in a league of their own. Born in 1870, Fish entered an orphanage after his father died, where he was beaten regularly. Abuse he claimed to enjoy. This early mix of trauma and pleasure twisted his perception of pain in ways that would later become terrifying. As an adult, appeared normal on the surface, a painter, husband, a father of 6, but behind closed doors was sinking into madness. Fish began engaging in extreme self-harm, inserting needles into his body and developing violent sexual fantasies, then turned these urges outward toward children. Fish targeted young children, often from poor families, luring them with gifts or job offers for their parents. Once Allen he tortured, murdered, and sometimes cannibalized his victims. In 1928, he abducted 10-year-old Grace Buddha, case that would shock the entire nation. Years later, Grace's mother received a letter in which Fish described the murder with chilling detail, a letter that finally exposed him. Fish was driven by a combination of psychosis, religious delusions, masochism, a belief that pain in any form was spiritually purifying. His calm demeanor and harmless appearance made him even more dangerous. Detectives traced the letters envelope back to a Manhattan boarding house where Fish was eventually captured. When confronted, quietly confessed crimes no one wanted to believe were real. Fish admitted to multiple murders, though the true number is unknown. His confessions were so graphic, some details were sealed from the public. Albert Fish was executed by electric chair on January 16, 1936. Even as he walked into the chamber, he reportedly said he was excited to feel the electric current one last time. Gilles de Rais is remembered as one of the earliest serial killers in recorded history. But what makes his story horrifying is that before becoming a monster, he was a national hero. Born in 1405 into a wealthy French noble family, Gilles grew up with privileged military training and elite education. He became a respected commander, fighting alongside Joan of Arc, earning the title Marshal of France, one of the nation's highest honors. But after Joan's execution, everything changed. Overwhelmed by grief, Gilles withdrew from the military and began burning through his Fortunian luxuries, alchemists, and occult rituals, searching for power in the darkest ways possible. What followed was pure nightmare. Between 1432 and 1440, children around his estate began disappearing. Gilles abducted young boys, mostly from peasant families, and brought them into his private chambers, where he assaulted, tortured, and murdered them. Witnesses later described scenes so brutal that even seasoned investigators shaken. Estimates suggest dozens to hundreds of children were killed. The true number may never be known. Gilles believed he could summon demons, gain treasure, or restore lost joy through ritualistic violence. His crimes mixed sadism, power, and a twisted obsession with the occult. His noble status helped him hide for years, as no one dared accuse a war hero. The truth surfaced only when Gilles became deeply indebted and clashed with church officials. An investigation uncovered skeletal remains and testimonies from terrified servants revealing what had been happening behind castle walls. Gilles was arrested in 1440 and the trial exposed a chamber of horrors unlike anything medieval France had seen. He confessed and despite his noble lineage was found guilty of murder, sodomy and witchcraft. On October 26, 1440, Gilles de Rais was executed, ending the reign of a man who had once ridden beside a saint, but died as one of history's darkest killers. Holmes is remembered as America's first true serial killer, but what makes his story terrifying is not just the murders, it's the building he designed specifically for them. Holmes was born in 1861, a brilliant, but deeply manipulative child with an early fascination for death and anatomy. His intelligence earned him a place at the University of Michigan where he studied medicine, knowledge he would later use for something far darker. After graduation, vanished into a new identity and reappeared in Chicago as Holmes. In the late 1880s, Holmes began crafting an elaborate plan, a building disguised as a hotbed engineered to kill what Chicago believed was a normal business was in reality most nightmarish structure the city had ever seen. The locals later called it Murder Castle. Inside were hallways that led nowhere, trapdoors, chambers, airtight rooms and hidden chutes that dropped bodies straight to the basement. Holmes lured young women with charm, jobs, and promises, then locked them inside soundproof rooms where he gassed, suffocated, or tortured them. Their bodies were taken downstairs destaked, stripped for skeletons, which he sold to medical schools for profit. Holmes didn't just kill, he monetized death. And while guests checked in, no one checked out. Holmes loved control. He treated the castle as his own private laboratory, believing he was too smart to ever be caught. His crimes were fueled by greed, power, and a sadistic desire to watch people disappear right under society's nose. For years Holmes slipped past suspicion changing, employ changing, stories and letting no one stay in the castle long and not to understand what it really was. But his downfall didn't begin with murder, it began with money. Holmes attempted an insurance scam that required the death of his partner Benjamin Pitezel. When Pitezel died under mysterious circumstances, detectives started connecting dots Holmes never intended anyone to find. In 1894, Holmes was finally arrested. As investigators searched the castle, they uncovered hidden rooms, bones, burned remains and torture devices that confirmed every horrifying rumor. Holmes confessed to 27 murders, though many believe the real number is far higher. He was sentenced to death and hanged in 1896. When the trapdoor opened, Holmes didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't show fear. He simply stared straight ahead as if death itself was just another one of his experiments. To this day, no one knows how many people vanished inside the murder castle. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most infamous unidentified serial killers in America. But what made him legendary was not just the murders, it was the game he played with the entire country. In the late 1960s, Northern California was peace of fuel until December 1968 when two teenagers were shot and killed near Vallejo. Police assumed it was isolated. They were wrong. The killer struck again and again, time targeting couples in secluded arresting gun sniffs and brutal close contact attacks. But then letters began arriving. The Zodiac sent cryptic messages to newspapers, filled with symbols, threats, and codes claiming he had killed dozens. He mocked, police taunted readers and demanded his letters be printed or he would strike again. One cipher contained 408 characters and he claimed it revealed his identity if anyone could solve it. Early victims were shot in parked cars, others were stabbed in daylight, and one couple was bound and attacked on a lakeside. With every killing he left shouts, fear, and a trail of impossible clues. The Zodiac craved attention, contrite and terror. He treated murder like a public performance, erringling in how the nation reacted and how helpless police felt. Experts believe he was organized, obsessed with power. Detectives interviewed thousands, built psychological profiles, and chased countless suspects. But the Zodiac always slipped away, sometimes by minutes. Each new letter renewed the panic and each new cipher sent investigators into a frenzy. Some messages were decoded, others still remain unsolved. After 1974, the letter stopped, the killing stopped, and the Zodiac disappeared with it, warning or explanation. His case remains open and theories continue to multiply, but none have ever been proven true. The Zodiac Killer was never caught. 5 confirmed victims, dozens more claimed. and a legacy of fear that still haunts America. Jack the Ripper is one of the most famous killers in human history, not because of how many he murdered, but because no one ever found out who he was. In 1888, London's East End was crowded, poor, and dangerous. Women struggled to survive. A crime was everywhere and police resources were stretched thin. Into this chaos a killer emerged. Between August and November, 5 women were found brutally murdered. Their throats were slashed and their bodies were mutilated with shocking precision. This was not random violence someone was hunting. The murders were fast selected, left behind scenes. So gruesomely terrified even seasoned detectives. Organs were removed, incisions were cleanest if the killer knew anatomy and practiced it. Women working the streets of Whitechapel began disappearing. One by one their bodies left in alleyways or against cold brick walls. With every new killing, fear spread through London and newspapers exploded with headlines naming him Jack the Ripper. Experts still debate the killer's motives. Sexual sadism, misogyny, a hunger for fame, or a twisted desire for control. His cold precision suggested he could have been a surgeon, a butcher, or someone trained to cut. What made him terrifying was not just brutality but the intelligence behind it. Scotland Yard launched one of the biggest manhunts in history. Detectives interviewed hundreds, followed every clue, and even roamed the streets in disguise. But for every lead, the Ripper seemed to be one step ahead. Then came the letters, taunting messages to policies, and with the name that would become legend. Were they real? A hoax? No one knows. After the final murder, Ripper vanished. No more letters, no more bodies, no more clues. As if he walked into the fog and never returned. To this day, Jack the Ripper's identity remains unknown. Over 130 years later, he is still one of the world's most chilling, unsolved mysteries.